RevOpsAF, the only podcast for people who are RevOpsAF and want to learn all about things that are RevOpsAF.
Our goal is to give the revenue operations community, that includes marketing, sales, and CS, for any of you not paying attention, the skills needed to accelerate their careers.
If you work in RevOps and you're tired of conferences that feel like badge scanning marathons in beige hotel ballrooms, then this is for you. RevOpsAF is the first and only community-driven revenue operations conference. It's built by operators for operators. You know, the people actually in the CRM at 10 p.m. fixing attribution, rebuilding territories, and explaining pipeline math to the board. No fluff, no generic keynotes, and no vendor-first agenda. Just real practitioners sharing real frameworks, real mistakes, and real playbooks you can actually steal. We're kicking things off in San Francisco, May 6th and 7th, 2026 for RevOpsAF North America. And yes, the after party includes full-on dance party karaoke, because if you can forecast revenue, you can absolutely butcher a Taylor Swift song. Then we head to London, June 10th and 11th, 2026 for RevOpsAF EMEA, closing it out at a retro arcade and gaming bar. High signal conversations by day, button mashing and leaderboard battles by night. This is not a hotel ballroom conference. It's operator energy, community first, high standards, and zero nonsense. Head over to www.revopsaf.com to grab your ticket. We'll see you there.
Hello and welcome to RevOpsAF, the podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Kamala Thompson, and today I am joined by Doug Bell. Doug, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey everybody, I'm Doug Bell. I am a fractional CMO, former partner at Chief Outsiders, striking out on my own here soon. I am the co-founder of a top 40 Substack called Cannonball GTM, which is how Kamala and I got to talking about the future of marketing, where things are heading. Also host a weekly, actually no, it's a monthly live stream every Friday, end of the month. We have it at 9 a.m. It's called Cannonball GTM. And yeah, I think that's it for me.
All right, so controversial statement to start things off to get people's attention and revenue operations. A lot of folks listening in probably have come from sales operations. We're pretty sales focused, even though we've evolved our career and maybe incorporated other departments into what we cover. I've always thought that the role of marketing is growing while sales is shrinking with the introduction of PLG and a lot of other things. Do you disagree? Do you think it depends on the type of company? What do you think there?
I actually have a different opinion, and it's tough to answer for all industries. What I'll try and do is just answer for SaaS. And what I'd say is I think that sales organizations get smaller, but more muscular. And I'll explain what that means here in a second. The other thing is I think SDRs are going to start becoming more important. Not the current version, which is like hire to fire model, where you're bringing in these really junior people. I think it's going to be more and more difficult to drive demos, and it's going to be more and more difficult to have really good sales conversations. And we're putting a lot of trust in really bright people, right? But they're 22, 23. And I think that role shifts. And I think you're going to find that they're more consultative. I think they're going to be higher comped. But with PLG, Kamala, I think you're going to find that those motions get more efficient, especially with AI. And yeah, I think they become more order takers. So I would agree in one case, but when it comes to non-PLG direct sale, I feel like sales gets more muscular, but they just get smaller and more mighty, if you will.
I very much agree with you in the case of the SDR and have felt that for a very long time. I've never understood why we're trying to throw the most junior person at, in many cases, a problem we have with possibly product market fit and messaging and ICP and telling them to figure it out and book us meetings. That's always been odd to me. The reason why I'm starting out like this is I feel like some RevOps folks don't pay as much attention to marketing. So I would really like to talk about your article and the role of the revenue engineer, which you coined. So can you give us a little background on the article?
Yeah, I sure can. So let's just say this, Kamala, you're more the RevOps person. I've been more sort of the CMO, CXO, CGO, CRO, that thing. So you've always been really good as a partner because you've always been in the weeds, but you've always understood strategy. You've had a couple tours as a C-level or as a marketing leader, so you get both pieces. And I also feel like I've become a bit of a scold lately, meaning so much of the industry is so far behind and the future is so clear, and that vision, at least to me and my partner, Jordan Crawford, is really clear. So all of that to say that in the current state, what's happening is that sales ops, MOps, RevOps, whatever flavor you want to be on, their job ultimately is to maintain some fairly rigid tech stacks. And by the way, it's a really important job, right? And how do we integrate those things? And how do we create motions across those stacks? And by the way, it's really hard, right? They're also in this place where their job is to create data hierarchies and maintain data hygiene. Also, in and of itself, a really hard job. And so that's the current state. What we see happening very quickly, and this is where the idea of the revenue growth engineer came in, is the rise of go-to-market engineering. And there's a lot of interpretation on what that means. In its current state, go-to-market engineers flank the whole RevOps stack, MOP stack, SOP stack. They're flanking it because in many ways they don't want to deal with the brittle nature and just the difficulty of attempting to orchestrate or integrate. That's not what they do. What they're doing is they're creating orchestration in separate systems, the most notorious of which is Clay or Clay.com. They're the leader. There are others. N8N is out there. Zapier is trying to create their own version. And you're seeing a lot of other SaaS tools integrating workflows, right? And so they're living in this place. What they're doing is they're saying, how do I use this amazing array of APIs I have access to within Clay and the ability to have micro level prompts, they call those Clayagents, that are relatable between each other, that prompt activity or create activities. Let's call that orchestration. And this is high value stuff. And you've probably encountered it through a Clayagency at some point. And so that's the current form of go-to-market engineering. And I think that's like, I don't know, innovators to early majority. It's somewhere in that place. But we're seeing their salaries go through the roof. The average comp there is about 85K. It's now up to 200K. You've got a lot of former coders going to this area as well. Okay. Having said all this, here's what they don't do well and where we think things are going to evolve. And this brings us all the way back to RevOps. So we think it has three legs, this position. The first is what I just talked about, right? The sort of core go-to-market engineer. The second is the ability to rationalize and operate across existing tech stacks. So they're no longer going to be able to go, okay, I'm just going to build this thing over there. They're going to have to work with the tech stacks. They're going to just have to. Here's the third component that I think is the most interesting because there's inevitability to needing to work with the tech stacks. We're going to bring these folks in-house, and that's what they're going to have to do. It's this. We believe very firmly that the current demand gen form and function is going to get absorbed by what we call revenue growth engineers. So think about it. Our experience here is you've got really good email marketers, you've got really great sort of PPC people, great paid social. Sometimes they can do all three, right? That's going to get absorbed by this go-to-market engineer position. And we think what will happen is we'll have RevOps people that will learn to be demand gen people, but they're going to see the world through another element I'm throwing in, which is Claude Code. There's a lot of other vibe coding going on. I think Claude Code is the best. And so Claude Code pulls all of this together. So I can have a Clay engine. I can integrate into my full tech stack, Rev tech stack. And by the way, I'm going to use Facebook as an example, or Meta. I can actually acquire through my go-to-market engineering skills, the ad IDs for all of my prospects. So now I'm in a place where I can do hyper-targeting. The final element here, Kamala, is that now you're dealing with the entirety of the buyer journey, and they start becoming responsible for things you and I used to obsess about. What's the engagement pattern? How do I use intent data? How do I use buying signals to optimize the entire journey? And they're going to effectively be people that are really good at reaching out to prospects when they're experiencing pain. And then they're going to be very good about optimizing that journey. I think this is 2 years out, by the way. It could be 3. But I will say you're going to see the go-to-market engineers taking over, and they're going to slowly but surely say, I can do what demand gen is doing.
So let's talk about what we haven't plainly stated is the problem that they're solving. Like we touched on it, but I really want to dig into what's going on with demand gen and outbound right now that we're trying to solve with these people.
Yeah, and I'm talking about an AI-enabled inevitable future. And I really appreciate you bringing this up because there are externalities. There are pieces that are going to drive this behavior. The first is very quietly, a lot of the horizontal and vertical SaaS companies are getting their butts kicked, for lack of a better term.
Yes.
And I had a little experience with one of our former accounts that we worked on together, which was this little company was kicking our butt from a pipeline standpoint, where they were using AI native practices like a go-to-market engineer would to get out in front of prospects. So that's the first sort of externality, which is people have already figured this out. and they're much more efficient. They have much smaller teams. They're doing a better job at data. So that's one piece. The second piece is I think venture capitalists and private equities are some of the dumbest human beings on the planet. I'm not saying they're not smart people, but they lack operational skills and they quite often oversimplify and impose playbooks. And I think they're as destructive as any other force in the world right now. And they are putting huge much pressure. By the way, Sherry Johnston had this amazing post on LinkedIn where she talked about the consequences of venture capital and private equity firms putting too much pressure on go-to-market leadership and all the rotation and all the time they're wasting by doing that. Read that. Go look up Sherry Johnston. It's a really brilliant article. That's the second piece. They're going, well, the AI native people in my portfolio are kicking ass. You guys need to do that without any pathway, which is why we started the Cannonball go-to-market Substack. We want to provide a pathway because that's fucking bullshit. It is. That's the second thing. The third thing is, guess what? Founders are beginning to understand they shouldn't take money from the private equity and the venture capital. So you've got this huge movement. I do a lot of mentorship. I do a lot of speaking in front of founders. I spoke in front of 150 founders a few months ago. None of them are taking money. So there's a huge amount of sort of efficiency pressure from the outset. They're not going to burn through $1 million experimenting on go-to-market. So those are the three externalities we're seeing that I think is going to really drive this behavior, as much as just the inevitability of skill sets building from go-to-market engineering, RevOps, and demand gen into one function.
Instead of go-to-market engineer, you're calling this revenue growth engineer.
That's right.
What breaks if companies treat this just as a technical operational support role? What other components do they need to be a revenue engineer?
Yeah, I'm going to go back early in my career to just give you an example of how I think these positions evolved. As I'm a product marketer at heart, always will be. And I was never responsible for pipeline, but I was responsible for a product. And I started doing my own demand gen and taking over demand gen, right? And I mention that because we're already seeing that happen in other words, an ownership mentality when it comes to go-to-market engineers. They're going, wait, and by the way, demand gen people are amazing. You and I have been demand gen people. We've managed, they're amazing. There's no lack of skills there. But what's happening is you're combining these two skill sets. And the thing that I think demand gen people have is this deep familiarity with how to work within the platforms, LinkedIn, Meta, Google. They understand it well. But the barrier to that is not that high, Kamala. It's really not that hard to understand this stuff. And so these go-to-market engineers who are those technical resources, I just think they're smart and they're going to figure this stuff out. But it's really the ownership piece that I see happening. And I'm seeing that happen more and more with go-to-market engineers. A former colleague of ours, by the way, I'm going to give you an exact example of this. A guy named Scott Stringfellow. He was the VP of sales when you were at a company we used to work out together. Really amazing guy, smart guy. One day he's like, why am I doing the sell stuff? And he's out there building, and he was the one who inspired me for revenue growth engineer, by the way. I had a conversation with Scott. He said, I'm going to fire off this campaign and I'm looking at this data and I'm going to integrate this. And I'm like, dude, you're not doing go-to-market engineering. You're worried about meetings. He's thinking about meetings, right? So it's that ownership mentality. So the negative consequence is that you're going to be obsolete, to be honest with you. So you're either going to be RevOps, you're going to be a go-to-market engineer, or you're going to be a revenue growth engineer. And I think inevitably, there's going to be really highly paid people. They're going to be paid at the same level that coders used to be paid before AI showed up.
I want to push on this just a little bit more. Yeah. So let's talk about if a RevOps person wants to go in this role or a marketer wants to go in this role. Those are two very different directions. What are the skill sets that people need? What's the cross-pollination that has to happen between demand gen and this operations technical role in order for this to work really well?
Yeah. By the way, I'm enjoying the conversation because my whole desk is shaking, so I'm going to pull my hands back. I'm going to pull my hands back. Okay, so I'm going to mention something we call the eras. No, we're not trying to rip off Taylor Swift. It was a total accident, but we're calling the eras, ERAS, maturity model. And simply stated, it has 4 stages, 3 of which are important today. Stage 1 is where most of us are. It's prompt engineering. It's single use. How do we interact with ChatGPT? Maybe we're in this place where we're using really complex, compound queries, but we're all like task-based, and we're getting so much better and so much faster as a result of that. That's a maturity 1, and I'd say 90% of the market's living there. Stage 2 is what I just talked about before. This is clay. This is orchestration. It's a great place to be. Stage 3 is Claude Code. And I know it's like stage three, it's all about ball bearings, Ed, or it's all about plastic, some obscure reference. Let me explain what Claude Code does and why we think it's so magical. Claude Code, if you will, is a development engine where you can code anything, but this is not vibe coding. You can develop something where there's a common context, and when you integrate large language models, so I'll go back to stage one. I do something, then the model goes, I don't know what you're talking about after that, unless you create a project or an agent, right? That's why you create projects and agents. In this case, you can build in recursive code via Python, and you can actually pull in and have your own instance, if you will, of a large language model. And guess what large language models are really good at? They're really good at learning.
Mm-hmm.
And that's stage three. So you asked, like, what's the cross-pollination? I sincerely believe that most folks are going to skip stage two. They're going to go right to stage three, and they're going to use Claude Code. And when I like my partner, Jordan Crawford, business partner, by the way, I have a wife, but when we hit December, we were like, we're exhausted. We're taking some time off. And he and I are super obsessive. And we both came back and we're like, Claude Code changes everything, except he knew how to code and I didn't. So I spent the last 10 days Claude coding. And folks, can I tell you, it is mind blowing what it does. And let me explain even one more slight detail, which is this. It doesn't just code. It plans and it talks to you, and then it does the development, and then it does the design, and then you work together. And by the way, I don't even type, I just talk to it, right? So we think Claude Code really, talking about cross-pollination, we think it's skill development. We think people are going to learn Claude Code, and I think that's going to be incredibly powerful. And I'm going to stop because I'll spend 15 minutes on everything Claude Code can do.
I would love to talk more about that, but since we're talking to revenue operators, let's lean a little bit more into the non-technical skills that they need to pick up in order to be in this role.
Yeah. So first thing is, my experience with RevOps is that they are gifted project managers, and they are very gifted at understanding the interrelationship between applications and the data that flows between them. Okay. That is a great starting point. You can take those really brilliant skills and then you can apply them. So think about Facebook or LinkedIn. Let's call that, let's just say Meta generally, even Reddit. It's a tool. It's a tool, folks. Like, you're just learning yet another tool, and you're very good at that. The difference here is that your sort of ability to understand systems and flows, your ability to understand interrelationships, you're just bumping it up into the performance sector. That's it. And I have to say, that scares RevOps people, and it should. It's, wait, I'm responsible for pipeline? Yeah, but you're going to double your income when you do that, right?
Yeah.
So from a skill set standpoint, you already have the skills. It's just about learning these additional tools, and it's okay to be called in the carpet. That's what Kamala, you and I have been doing for a long time. I have for 25 years. It's just a big part of the change, and I don't want to oversimplify it. It's really scary, but it's not that hard. You're just learning new tools, honestly.
Yeah. I would add, though, a lot of the examples you gave in your article were around pain-based segmentation.
Mm-hmm.
That requires us to pay attention and have a depth of knowledge around ICP fit and personas and a lot of things that it's easy to, I don't want to say ignore, but not pay attention to as you're really focused on all the systems complexities, because there's so many and there's a long list on our plate. So let's talk maybe through some pain-based segmentation examples you've seen out there so people can get their brains wrapped around it.
Yeah, as I tend to do, I'm oversimplifying things, Kamala. And I would say this, you are going to have to be a little bit more of a full stack marketer that I'm speaking to. And Kamala's called me out on that. But here's the thing. I firmly believe that this is a matter of training Claude Code or training large language models. You still have to understand what I'm going to talk about, and you need to understand what I'm going to talk about. But please understand that you don't have to become a product marketing or a product expert to understand what's happening in your market. Full stop. Okay, so pain-based segmentation. What this simply means is that we move away from this idea of an ideal customer profile, where we use pretty useful information that's entirely about what my brand wants to do in terms of who we think our best customers are. That's what an ICP is. And I've been a proponent of ICP for 15 years and have installed it at multiple companies. Like, I've always been a big fan. And that's great, but there is always a point where you have better information. And this is where pain-based segmentation comes in.
Yeah.
Before I talk about that, I have to bring up another sort of marketing wonk term that we coined at the Cannonball, which is an existential data point. And all that means is this: there is quite often a dividing line between a successful and an unsuccessful business. That can be measured. It's not esoteric. And that's why we call it existential. This is the difference between a going concern and a failing concern. Okay. And the reason we can now do that is we have access to mountains of publicly available data. This is third-party data. And so when you have access to that data, especially, and this is why I love focusing on vertical SaaS, especially if you're selling into financial services, medical, healthcare, construction, think about any industry where there is publicly available data. And there are gobs of it. Even though the Trump regime is doing their best to keep this information from us, there's a gargantuan amount of this data out there. And what that allows you to do is to actually use that data to come up with what your existential data point is. And I'm going to give you a really crystal clear example. One of our customers last spring is an organization that sells operations, CRM, and fleet management software to equipment lessors. These are folks that deliver equipment to construction companies so that those construction companies can build stuff, right? Because construction companies don't own their own equipment anymore. It makes no sense. There's a huge capital infrastructure and maintenance infrastructure that they don't want to deal with. So they sold to these businesses. And when we work with them, what we said is, hey, let's go figure out what a successful business looks like if you're an equipment lessor. We figured it out pretty quickly. It took us about an hour. I'm not kidding. Happy to provide the link where we did it live. And what we figured out really quickly was it was their utilization rate, fleet utilization rate. Below 60% utilization rate, they were bleeding cash. Above 60%, they were in good shape. If they had 6 months below 60% utilization, they were going to have to go out of business or sell equipment. And we called that the burn down. They were selling equipment to stay on top of cash flow, and inevitably they were bought out by another organization. That's a really good example of an existential data point. It's crystal clear, and it's easy to measure. There's publicly available data because guess what? And this is why we love publicly available data. Every piece of equipment on that lot has to be bonded or insured. Every piece of equipment, because that equipment is dangerous, has to be registered with the state, whether it's idle or whether it's out on construction. Oh, by the way, when it makes it to a construction site, it gets rebonded under the insurance of the construction site. So think about this. We've got public Department of Transportation records and insurance records, which, by the way, are public, right? So we had all that data and we figured out, and Kamala, here's the long wind up to a pain-based segment. Any organization that had below 60% utilization rate had a 0.92% rating. This is on a scale of 0 to 1. What's the highest pain? And those are the folks we reached out to first. And so if you imagine each sort of layer, if you think of a layer cake, you can think of a bullseye, each sort of layer or space or standard deviation out meant there was less pain. It was a less favorable pain-based segment. Oh my God, Doug, that's marketing wonky. I can't do that. Yeah, exactly. I couldn't either. We had Claude Code do it. Right? We had Claude Code go and stitch together this data, and that's how we came to it. And those were pain-based segmentation. And I'm going to give you one more example, Kamala, and that is actually utilization above 85%. You were like, oh my God, they're like crushing it. No, they had another problem, which was they had to decide whether they're going to spend millions of dollars on additional capital equipment. So even though they were out here, the organization that we were working with, they crushed that segment because they had a whole different issue. It wasn't a cash flow issue. It was an issue of whether I had to recapitalize and take on loans to buy more equipment.
And I love this because I think so many revenue operators are natural, like they love a puzzle. They love a puzzle. And looking at your product in these different ways, I'm not sure if the company had ever thought of doing this and attacking publicly available data like this, because it would have been a slog without something like Claude Code.
In a methodology to get there. And we have a methodology, but I have to say other people will come up with them. I think I like ours the best right now, but I'm seeing other people. There's Eric Nowoslawski and Kellen Casebeer. I'll just mention two other people who have their own methods, and they're really good. And I think it's going to be the methodology battle coming up here in the next year or two. You can tell it's not a big battle because I'm referring to my competition. I think the models will change as quickly as our methods change.
So people leaning in and saying, this sounds interesting. Have we mentioned how much you think these folks are going to be able to make every year?
Yeah, this will teeter back and forth. I'll just say that right now there's such a skill and labor gap in this area. One of my former clients, as I was departing, I'm like, hey, you can't afford the go-to-market engineer I was using, Jordan Crawford, but you need another one. And as I went out to this our Substack community, it's just chock-a-block full of go-to-market engineers. I'm like, hey, it's a great company, great people. I really love working for them. Who wants to raise your hand? Nobody raised their hand because they're so overbooked. So what we're seeing right now is we're getting amazing engineers from Mexico, Central America, South America, and Egypt, oddly enough. And so these are areas where they've poured a huge amount of money into the university systems, and there aren't jobs for them. So there's like that pay, like I think it's going to balance back out, is my point, Kamala. But Americans were silly, would like people to speak our language and not have an accent and be in a city we care about. Those people have gone from 85K in comp to about 200K in comp. So I'd say if you're smart, you can reach out to me on the Cannonball. Like, there's amazing resources in Mexico and in Egypt. Go reach those people and get over yourself, man. See what they have an accent. They're amazing.
Yeah, agreed. So people wanting to pick up the skills.
Yeah.
You mentioned your Cannonball Substack. Where else should they be focusing their time?
Yeah, I would say right now Cannonball it's really bipolar. Sorry if you are bipolar, anybody's bipolar out there. It's true. It is like very deep. It's advanced engineering for the go-to-market engineers. And we're now building content for the growth CGOs right now. So if you're in the advanced category, it's okay. It's a great place to start. If you're new, not bad. We're trying to make it better. Clay, just go to Clay. Just hit clay.com. They have Clay clubs. They have Clay University. And just Google, or not Google, go to YouTube and search on Clay. There is such a rich list of resources. But I would also refer to Kellen Casebeer, Kellen Casebeer. And it sounds like exactly, it's case beer, like case of beer. And then Eric Nowoslawski. There are others that are out there. I think those are the two that are the most aggressive with what they're publishing. Eric Nowoslawski you can find on YouTube. Kellen you can find everywhere. Just go to LinkedIn. You'll find Kellen. He's probably got 40,000 connections, and he's always happy to chat.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Is there anything else you want to say to revenue operators out there before we do an outro and where people can find you?
You can always find us on cannonballgotomarket.com on Substack or our website. Either is fine. I think the other thing I'd say to folks is I know I'm being a bit of a scold right now, and I can't help it. I have a deep affection for and a lot of belief in what RevOps has done for us. I've been the CMO of a company that serves RevOps people. I'm a big fan. I also say I think you guys need to start evolving. Need to start doing it like now. Needs to happen now. The other thing I'd say is there's another piece to this, Kamala, which is people recognizing that their tech stacks are going to start getting stripped down quite a bit. There's going to be a lot of that. And so I think there's a role for folks to be the deconstructors and the efficiency drivers. And by the way, if you have Salesforce, get rid of it, get HubSpot. That's all I got.
Wow, going out with a bang. That was shots fired. Doug, thank you so much for being on the show. It's always a pleasure. Where is the best place for people to find you to network? I think we mentioned it a couple times, but let's make it super clear.
Yeah, you know what? LinkedIn is always great for me. So I'm Doug Bell on LinkedIn. You can find me under Cannonball. You can go to the Substack, as I mentioned before. I'm pretty easy to find. You can just Google existential data point. You can Google pain-based segments. You can Google permissionless value props. By the way, if you're watching the show 5 years from now, Google was a search engine that you use to go find stuff. Just so you know.
It's like explaining what VCRs are. It's fine.
Exactly.
Thanks, Ken.
Thanks for having me on the show, Kamala.
Thanks so much for tuning in to today's episode, everybody.
For more great content like this, join our community at RevOpsCoop.com and check out the links provided in the show notes.
Keep it RevOpsAF, y'all.